Hello everyone, welcome back to Lead Genie. This is Ronita and I'm back with my fourth video. Uh, Lead Genie started the journey with supposedly the most important text, the most significant text that single-handedly represents the rich heritage of Indian literature. We started our early discussions with Mahabharata. This is my fourth video where I'll be talking to you people about the Mahabharata. We started discussing Mahabharata as a text that was rediscovered by the modern Indian readers, thanks to the mediation, the role played by the language of English in bridging the gap between the early Sanskrit version of the text, and thanks to inclusion of or introduction of English as a medium of translation of early ancient texts, the English renditions of the text that remained have helped modern Indians sort of bridge their gap between their golden literary past and their present, which is very, very dependent upon the language English. So now, sort of pushing over to the next step of our discussion, today we will try to understand, I'll try to introduce, this text in particular to you, in association, using certain fun stories to go by. To start with, we need to remember that the way we look at Mahabharata today, the text, of course, it is not, in fact, okay, let me frame it this way. Mahabharata is not a single text. That might be a curious proposition, but then it is what it is, because we are talking about a time from when Mahabharata originates. This was a time that did not have patents, that essentially did not even have writers or poets, leaving their names as, mentioned at the beginning or the end of a text to claim their ownership to a text. They sort of sang it, or composed it, or maybe left certain manuscripts of those texts just for the sake of those texts. No sense of ownership was ever claimed when it comes to a Veda Vyas, claiming Mahabharata to be my text, or a Kalidas to be claiming Abhigyana Shakuntalam to be my text. No such association. Because we need to remember that the way in which we understand history today, or the act of history writing, historiography today, it was very different. In fact, it did not exist until the late, you could say, end of the medieval times, when historiography or record keeping as a conscious discipline sort of emerged. So all that existed was a few random references, maybe in the beginning lines, where the poet would start his text by sort of paying a homage to the muses, and there somewhere at a random pace would mention this being the song sung by so and so, or this being the lines written down by so and so, which would be that one little marker which would tell you, okay, probably this was a text written by this person, right? That means the fact that we associate Vedvyasa's name to Mahabharata is not really something that we can for sure claim to be the only penmanship behind the text, because these were texts, the Mahakavyas had a random circulation all across the country, and it has traveled across generations, across centuries, in various regional cultural spaces of the country, which includes different linguistic spaces, different cultural spaces, and each of those spaces have contributed a little bit of them to Mahabharata. Hence, for example, if you talk of the Ramayana, similarly, though essentially the Valmiki Ramayana is taken to be the mainstream text, nonetheless, you must have all come across very popular mentions of, Tulsidasa's Ramayana, or Surdas's Ramayana, because that doesn't mean that these are denigrations from the original Valmiki Ramayana. It just means that when a Tulsidas or a Surdas, or for that matter, the Maithili language or the Bengali language received these texts, these poets, for example, Surdas or Tulsidas, they sort of, as a result of the inspiration they drew from their experience of reading such amazing texts, sort of tried to revisit them, and a little bit of their regional cultural orientation, the regional belief systems, the thought process, the value systems, the linguistic patterns, the way in which the rhythmic patterns of those particular spaces worked within those regional, language structures worked, got added to them. Hence, you could say the entire Indian subcontinent could claim a Mahabharata to be its text, or the entire Indian subcontinent could claim the Ramayana to be its own text, right? Now, coming to Ved Vyas being the name behind Mahabharata, or the name that we essentially associate with the text. To start with, Ved Vyas is not a name, it's a title. Ved coming from the Veda or the Vedas, and Vyas literally comes from the root word, Sanskrit root word Vyapti or Vyash, which means spread. So Veda Vyas is a title, placed upon a person who sort of lays out the Vedas. So that's a title. So then, who is this person if that's not his name? Well, Vedavyas, his birth name was the Vedavyas we associate with Mahabharata. His birth name was Krishna Dvaipayan, right? How, I'll tell you who or where he is coming from, who his parents are. Let's start with that story. Now, all those of you who have already seen, cinematic renditions or television renditions of the Mahabharata, which is which is a very common probability, high probability of that. Shottavati and Shantanu happen to be the some of the early characters with whose introduction the story of the Mahabharata starts. For example, I, as a kid, remember watching B.R. Chopra's rendition of Mahabharata for Doordarshan, where the story had started with, Shantanu, the then king of Hastinapur. Sort of, first, it starts with his first marriage, where the king is shown being extremely attracted to a demigoddess, in this case Ganga, and the king was completely smitten by Ganga, and he when proposes to her, she says, first of all, I'm not a being of the mortal space. I hope you know that I'm a demigoddess. Nonetheless, if I accept your proposal and I get married to you and I stay with you, there is an arrangement. And you have to accept my clause, only then I'll be with you. And given at that point of time, Shantanu was completely, smitten by her presence, by her beauty, by her charm. He couldn't think of anything else. So he goes ahead and sort of says, fine, absolutely, whatever you lay out. And Ganga says, fine, I can be married to you, I can stay with you, as long as through the entire time that we are married to each other, you can never question any of my actions, you can never ask me a question as to why I am doing something. Shantanu says, fine, they get married. And of course, for any kingdom, for any king, the most important concern, preoccupation, as well as responsibility is to procure an heir to the throne, right? Because that essentially ensures the continuity of the dynasty, a safe state of existence to the kingdom. So within some time of Shantanu and Ganga getting married, she gets pregnant and she gives birth to a healthy child, and not just a child, a male child. Now, this is a very important trope for all of us to remember. Just procreating or bearing the next generation is not enough a function for a queen. What's expected of her essential job is to not just procure an heir, but to procure a male heir. So, of course, Ganga did that. Shantanu was very happy. But what did he find? The very next morning that the newborn was, the newborn came into this world, he saw that Ganga silently in the early hours of the next day, sort of with the newborn in her lap, was walking down to a riverbank. He followed his wife, and then what does he see? He sees that Ganga sort of submerges the newborn into the water without a tear in her eyes, and she comes back. Of course, Shantanu still remembers the promise, so he doesn't ask a question, but of course, he's extremely sad. He's in too much of pain. He is still he's in love with his wife, but he cannot understand why exactly she pretended that way, because she's a mother. She had just given birth to her first child, and how could she do that? But it was not the last of his sufferings. The same episode is repeated 6 other times. So, in total, Ganga, without answering a single question or a single, a sigh from Shantanu, successfully submerges 7 of her offsprings into the waters of the river Ganga, her own sort of representation. On the eighth attempt, of course, which is again a male child, and remember, all the 7 submerged newborns were male children. So, on the eighth attempt, Shantanu stops Ganga. Now, what happens? Well, in order to know that, you have to sort of wait for my next video. Thank you, everyone. See you next time. Let's have fun. Let's continue discussing Mahabharata. Thank you.